My name's Lee Sandler. I'm a partner in the law firm Sandler, Travis, and Rosenberg. I didn't choose to focus on it. I fell into it by accident. The first job I had was in the Department of Justice in an office called the Customs Section. I didn't want to be a customs lawyer. They told me I could be a trial lawyer and I could travel. And so I did all that, and by accident, I started learning this area of the law. Well, I started in the Department of Justice in New York City in what was then a part of the civil division called the Customs Section. We tried cases in the Customs Court, which had jurisdiction all over the country. So most of my trials were actually in San Francisco while I was living in New York. About 6 years into that, I was contacted by a law firm interested in hiring someone, and I liked the situation, so I went there. Spent 2 years at that firm, and at the end of 2 years, Tom Travis, who's been my partner for 41 years and was an associate at that firm, the two of us resigned on the same day, started this firm with offices in New York and Miami, and we've been together for just over 41 years now. There's certainly more people doing international trade work than there were before. There's still no firm that is focused exclusively on customs and international trade regulation the way we are. We began, as I said before, I just did the customs work, but step by step we added other government regulatory agencies that enforce their laws at the border. So we wound up doing FDA work or intellectual property work or consumer product safety work, the Department of Agriculture issues. Here in South Florida you have a tremendous amount of perishable cargo which gets regulated by customs on behalf of the Food and Drug Administration and the Department of Agriculture. So if you don't know how to deal with those other government agencies, you can't resolve the issues for the clients. There are other competitors in Miami, but no one's structured the way we are. Becker and Polikoff has traditionally had 1 or 2 attorneys that worked in this area. We have 60 attorneys that work in this area. Greenberg Traurig has, I don't know if they have anyone in Miami now, but they have attorneys in Washington that do international trade cases the same way we do in the anti-dumping area and before the International Trade Commission. Well, the industry itself, when we started in 1977, was a lot of mom and pop operations. They were really family-run businesses. The freight forwarders and customs brokers were people from Cuba, from Venezuela, from Colombia, that were really generating business from the countries they came from, relatives and friends, and establishing themselves in South Florida. They were small businesses that began to grow, and many of them have been bought out. A handful of them still exist as family businesses. But the dramatic change has been that it was a very hands-on, small, medium-sized business community. Now the UPSs, the FedExes, the large freight forwarders have bought out a lot of those businesses, so they're not controlled by the local people quite the same as they were historically, although I say there's still a handful of those left. We do a lot more trade work now than we used to do before, and we do more work in Washington and government affairs and lobbying on the Congress. But we've always had a bit of that, but now it's more robust. But going to the other federal agencies is not just dealing with the customs laws, but with the health, safety, and welfare laws. The security requirements that came in the international trade arena after 9/11 have grown another large area of our practice as well. There's specifics in the Miami market that we do, working with the perishables industry, whether it's fresh cut flowers or fruits and vegetables and that type of trade that takes place here. Our client base is really national, and just to give an example, my first client was Procter & Gamble. They're a client 41 years later. They've really only had one significant import program through Miami through all those years. So what we found particularly interesting about Miami, though, was that having practiced in New York, where you're dealing with high-level policy and issues and big penalty cases and that sort of thing, we came down to Miami. we really wound up on the Miami River and the Port of Miami working with freight forwarders and customs brokers, really understanding the logistics of trade and the dynamics of the problems of getting goods released immediately. So it was a hands-on learning experience. And we've continued that. We have, I chair a committee that meets once a month with the federal agencies that regulate trade and the freight forwarders, the customs brokers, flour industry, the airport, the seaport, and it's just a round table talking about what are the current things that are going on. So we have a wealth of good information and contacts on the issues that really affect importers and exporters. And Miami is a good place for picking up on all of those issues. I used to say that you always expected the administration, whether Democratic or Republican, to ultimately embrace free trade. And the best example would be NAFTA, where the Republicans conceived of it, they negotiated it, the Democrats were a drag on it, but by the time it was ready to be ratified in the Congress, Clinton, a Democrat, was in the White House, and he pulled out every favor he could to get it passed and supported it. In the last election, complete reversal. Both Democrats and Republicans opposed free trade agreements. Trump pulled us out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He canceled the TTIP negotiations with Europe, renegotiated NAFTA, and every session keeps raising the ante as to where that will come out. No one really knows. So this is the first time where I see a dramatic change. There have always been changes, but the changes have almost consistently been towards the expansion of free trade agreements, with a companion piece, though, with the increase in certain regulatory regimes, health, safety, security, Food and Drug Administration, TSA, those sorts of issues have become an impediment to trade, or at least new regimes that people have to deal with as a counterpoint to the loosening of trade through free trade agreements. This administration, we're now seeing high duty rates imposed on washing machines, on solar panels. Aluminum and steel will probably be the subject of increased duties in the next week. That's pending at the White House. So those changes are different than what we'd seen in the last 30 or 40 years. This is a tightening of the rules of trade.